Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
How are those babies doing?
Baruch Hashem. So they graduated from an incubator to a crib. So that's huge. That means they can maintain their own body weight. And then also Chaim got his first bottle feeding on Friday. So
Wow.
yeah, that was huge. And yeah, so thank God. And they're growing and cannot complain. And I'm taking everybody to the zoo right now. So I can't stay on the whole time, but I just wanted to say hello and sorry I
Amazing.
missed last week. Yeah. How are you
Yeah, so
doing?
I did the recording from last week
Yeah.
and so it's there and where we are at is right now. Hi, Esther. So right now what we're doing um,
Hi, Stacy. Enjoy the zoo.
Thank you. How are you doing?
Doing good, thanks.
Good.
Good
good.
to hear the update on the twins.
Baruch Hashem. Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. They're looking like actual babies now instead of like fetuses. It was
That's
wild.
amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. So where we finished off last week, for everybody who might not have been here, is we were talking about Zri Zut. And last week we discussed, and Zri Zut is motivated, aligned action. So we discussed, first we clarified it, right, in the first week. And then last week we talked about what it's made out of, like what exactly is this aligned, motivated action. Last week we talked about, well, how do I go about then creating aligned, motivated action? And today we're going to talk about the limiting beliefs, poor habits, like everyday grind that gets in the way of living life with aligned and motivated habits. And just before
That's
we keep going,
exactly what I need to hear today.
does everybody know what it feels like? Have you ever felt that feeling in your life of aligned, motivated action?
If it means that everything that by the end of the day you feel like you've accomplished what was important and priority to you, then recently not. And that's why I'm so happy you're doing this. But if that's what you mean, yes, it's definitely a good feeling when it happens.
So it's not just about the accomplishment, it's the feeling that you're following through, you're activated, you're motivated, you're pursuing something that you know is right. Like you're just pursuing the right thing clearly. And we're going to take the outcome out of it.
That's why we're in this class.
Exactly. So today we're going to talk about really what gets in our way. And we're going to be honest and vulnerable and just own it.
What page
Because
are
if this was written, like a million years ago, basically, and it is the hallmark, the gate of trust and Messios Yesharim, the path of the just, are two foundational Jewish texts, the beginning of all personal development ever. Like, obviously, this is universal, and there's nothing wrong with us that we have these things that detract and that we're meant to work on overcoming them. So let's get started. We're on page 122, chapter 9. And remember, just to remind everybody who's watching or coming now, we start with the original text of the Ramchal, the original author, with like, I give kind of like my putting it into modern terms. Then we read Rabbi Tursky's, who is a psychologist, a rabbi, Hasidic, more modern day approach, which he also used to help a lot of people overcome addiction over many, many years of his practice. And we switch off and then we discuss our thoughts or our feelings today, kind of the feminine gate of trust perspective. So let's get started, page 122. And this is the original text. The primary factor that distracts from Zri Zut is the pursuit of physical tranquility, loathing for exertion, and indulgence in pleasure.
class over? Keep
Some
going.
who strives For these will find it difficult to arise for morning services, to cut short his meal before afternoon services, to pursue a mitzvah, or to hasten to store study. Someone who gets into these habits is no longer master over himself, because his will has become subject to his habits, which becomes second nature. And so this is obviously true, right? What keeps us from pursuing greatness in any area? The dislike of working hard at something, right? Like getting tired easily, not being able to like exert ourselves, wanting peace. Like, come on, like, can't this just be easy? And my relationships, like, I don't want to have any conflict, but out of conflict comes vulnerability and intimacy and growth, right? Like, no, can we just all be on the same page and all think and act exactly alike, right? Physically, we talk about our health all the time. If we're not willing to face our emotions, or we're not willing to move our body, especially when it's uncomfortable, we're never going to grow and be healthy. And indulgence in pleasure. A little bit of indulgence is so good for us. We're supposed to enjoy this world, but a focus on indulgence steals everything that we care about and all of our motivation to do the things that will change the world and change ourselves in return for that immediate gratification. So now we're going to go from his Haggadah. You said it, you called it Passover. And in Rabbi Twersky's Haggadah, he's going to quote, I cited the case of a recovering drug addict who said to his father at the Passover Seder, how can you say you were a slave? You don't know what it means to be a slave, but I do. I was addicted to drugs. I lost every remnant of freedom. Drugs were my master, and I did everything I had to do for them. Narcotics are not the only master to which a person may fall subject. Anyone who cannot control his actions has become enslaved. Many people who smoke cigarettes know they are lethal and would like to stop smoking and are unable to do so. Many have become slaves to cigarettes. A person who cannot control his anger has become a slave to rage. Someone who cannot control eating is likewise enslaved, as if someone whose indolence makes it impossible to act swiftly and properly. The Ramchal is right. When a person pursues tranquility and pleasure as the primary goal, he will become enslaved by these and may not be able to free himself to do the things he knows he should do. A human being should pride himself on being free. Slavery is abhorrent even when it is not cruel, because it deprives a person of the dignity of being free and making his choices in life. Zri Zut is thus an indication that one is a free person.
Can I ask a quick question?
Please.
I like being in control. I think I just got a wake-up call after 53 years that I'm wondering if my need for control is an avoidance of facing the paragraph that we just read. I feel a loss of control, not because I feel like I have to be in control, but obviously somewhere in more than one places, there are so many things that I'm a slave to that have just become a part of my life that I feel like I lost control, but I'm trying to regain the control, not in the right places.
That is so honest and so beautiful and so normal. 90% of the time when we're trying to control other people, it's because we've given up control of ourselves.
Okay, I think I'm ready to go forward. Let's go.
You're such an asset. Thank you so much, Esther.
That was just like, wow. Okay.
So we're on page 123, back to the original text, which we see how wise and honest in our human frailties this is. Man was not created for tranquility, but to struggle and toil. Man is born to labor. If one accepts this, he will find divine service easy. How much is our rejection of hard work? And again, this is part of this is our buying into this societal fake image, right? And in our day and age, it might be social media. Everything should be fine. And if you're not fine here, let me sell you something to fix you. Oh, your relationship's not tranquil? Let me tell you something. Your nervous system.
They only what works.
What?
Nowadays, they only fix what works.
What do you mean?
Like diets. If one worked, there would be one. Like there's 35 million of them. But for like cell phones that work just fine, all of a sudden, or my internet that was working just fine, they come and they upgrade it, and it didn't work for 4 days. I couldn't work. Like they change things that are working, and they don't focus on things that need the change. And I think we do the same thing without realizing it. That's what you just said.
Mm-hmm. And when we look that everything has to be a constant state of improvement. You know, when I work with clients on their health, I tell them I'm going to give you the tools and strategies to be in a constant state of improvement, right? To be in a constant state of working with your body, getting feedback and improving your relationship with it and how you're eating and you're living. But it's never tranquil. No one is ever at one weight. No one is ever in one place in their relationship, whether it's with a human being or with your body or with God. There is always going to be a struggle and a toil. And if we accept that that struggle and toil isn't wrong, doesn't mean that we failed. And then we choose, right? When we're using Zri Zut, it's motivated, aligned action. It's toiling in your beautiful garden. It's hard work, but it's not such an unpleasant experience.
Right.
And you're, in prison working in a rock garden, you're struggling. Okay. Like your circumstances in your mind have created a situation that you don't want to be there. You're in chains. You're being forced to be there and do the work. And so we want this Zri Zut, and we recognize there are things that get in the way of us feeling like we're cultivating versus struggling. Because really, it's the same exact effort. One, you're like feeling in a good place emotionally. I'm cultivating my garden. I'm parenting with love, right? And discipline and all the things. Or I'm struggling and I'm toiling and I'm frustrated and I'm anxious. Okay. So
But while you're frustrated and struggling and anxious, you're really being successful. You're just so caught up in the stressful part that you don't remember that there are good parts too. It's not one or the other.
Yes. But when we're struggling against it, sometimes we're not going to be as effective as we want to be, because
that prevents diseases. Okay.
Right, exactly. And so we're not going to necessarily get the right results. And then we're going to feel frustrated that we're not doing anything because we're getting in our own way, which is what here we're talking about, that we all do, myself included. And I'll just share something here. This weekend, I had my husband and I are really working on our arguments and being better arguers. And we're really improving. They go much faster. Like we get to that nice place of like deeper understanding of the flaws and traumas and whatever of the other person, really where they are, much faster. It's still not pleasant. It doesn't feel like cultivating a garden. It feels like when you're done, you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was sitting and there are so many weeds. Like I am overwhelmed. Like, okay, I'm really happy that I can see honestly all the weeds. Right? But that is because there's a fake image in my brain that cultivating a garden is just working in this beautiful flowers and everything's grown and everything is handy to work. Gardening is sometimes sitting in the weeds and pulling them out and planting the new things and watering them and being patient.
As Stacy showed us a couple weeks ago.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking of when she was working our garden. And that's the truth. It's a fake image, a fantasy in our brain that makes us unhappy with the struggle and the toil that's necessary. Okay. So this is from Job, right? And Job, we know, was a very important example and metaphor, whether it happened, it didn't happen, it's an allegory, it really happened, it doesn't matter. It's really about this constant struggle of good things happen to bad things happen to good people. How do we deal with suffering? How do we deal with pain? Whereas man is permitted to enjoy rest and enjoy worldly pleasures we're supposed to, these are not the purpose of our existence. We have to be able to set them aside when necessary. When a person makes rest and pleasure the goals of his existence, he can't set them aside. He becomes a slave to them. Even pursuit of divine wisdom, the most noble aspiration a person could have, is not the desired goal. Rashi says this is laboring in Torah. Indeed, the Talmud interprets the verse to mean that a man was born to toil in Torah. Western culture has been plagued by an epidemic of drug addiction, which has been particularly severe among young people. A major factor that fuels this epidemic is the primacy of pleasure and tranquility. This goes also for obesity, right? This goes also for debt. All of these are the same core problem. So when we work on any area, we improve all areas when we realize we're working on foundation, right? So young people are disillusioned and they don't feel like they got their fair share of these culturally accepted goals. Well, what's my fair share of all this pleasure and tranquility? And so they use brain altering chemicals to achieve them at grave risk and grave consequences, even death. Rejection of this hedonistic goal and accepting the principle that man was born to struggle and toil would prevent the devastation of drug addiction, because drug addiction is a form of escape. Okay, 1 second. Hold on. My daughter's trying to text me from America that she wants a piercing.
She comes first.
Sorry. I'm like, no more piercing. What is going on? Wait an hour. Talk to me then. Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Okay, back to the Ramchal.
You should be grateful that she's asking your opinion.
No. Her aunt is like, I'm not signing this parental consent form unless you tell me it's okay. Okay. Another distraction from Zri Zut is excessive fear. One may have an unrealistic fear of the cold, the heat, accidents, disease, the wind. As Solomon says, the indolent person says, how could I go out? There's a lion out there on the road. Our sages consider such fear to be a character defect. The sinners in Zion fear. This is why the psalmists say, trust in God and do good. The problem of anxiety is at its core of psychological theory. On the one hand, it's a legitimate fear, which is healthy, because only a fool would recklessly expose himself to danger. And on the other spectrum is the phenomenon of panic attacks, where a person is suddenly overwhelmed with feelings of terror in the absence of any stimulants to evoke those feelings. Such attacks are often a physiological rather than a psychological or emotional origin, and are due to an imbalance of body chemistry, which can be corrected with proper medication. Even more so, this book was written how long ago? Let's see. When was this published? Sorry, I'm looking. 5755. Okay, in the Jewish year 5755, 2021. Since then, also, we've had this huge amount of studies done on somatic healing, which I work with a lot of my clients, where we talk about you're having this anxious fear response, and it's not even from what you're thinking or feeling. It's something starts in the body itself. Your body is reacting to something that it perceives as a threat that emotionally is not a threat to you and mentally is not a threat to you, but it's coming from the nervous system itself. That could be, it reminds your body of a trauma of your past. It could be that you're overstimulated, right? Where we have so much different things in our environment now that have ever happened before, right? And think about what you see on social media, the war we have going on. You know, it used to be you'd have the war in your location and you're praying for the Jewish people as a whole. Now, everything that's happening to everybody is coming to you through your cell phone, is coming to you through the newspaper, is coming to you through the thing. And so you're being inundated and your body is physically reacting to a danger that isn't physically present. Even though you know you're not physically at risk in this moment, you feel as if you are. And people can react to food like this. If they felt, you know, that carbs and they've made that carbs are evil, they can have a panic attack about being placed a piece of cake in front of them. And it's crazy, but it's really true. And now we know that we can do better than just drugs. We can actually release these physical habits from the body. But the Ramchal knew this science as a tradition passed down thousands of years before, you know, we had the drugs and we had everything else. And we're kind of coming back to a lot of this knowledge today, which is really cool. I'm not anti-drugs, but drugs are a tool temporarily to suppress these feelings in the nervous system. They don't heal them. And we want to be able to release and heal them as well. Okay. Indulgence is not always the reason for anxiety. Irrational fears may be more unconscious defenses to protect
What is indolent? What does indolent mean?
Lazy. It's a big word for lazy or for being apathetic or not able to get moving, right? We're talking about what gets in the way of motivated, like woohoo action. Okay. Like that sense of apathy, that sense of indolence, that sense of like, I can't go do this thing. Like I could get hurt. Like, but it's very unlikely you'll get hurt, but in your mind, or I'll fail. So it could be a psychological hurt. But you know, like really that wouldn't happen if you failed. It's a made up feeling from your body that this is dangerous. And once your body feels it's dangerous, your brain will make up a lot of reasons so that your body can be right. Because it's a two-way system. Your body will react to what your mind said is dangerous, but if your body says something's dangerous, your mind will make up a reason why it's right.
Wow.
Right? So if you hear your baby crying, a new mother, right, and her breast milk starts flowing, that's a physical response. She didn't think my baby is suffering. Her body responded first. Then the mind goes, I better go get the baby and nurse the baby. Okay. So in his book that he wrote, Life's Too Short, he discussed at length various behaviors that result from unwanted feelings of inadequacy. People who feel this way suffer twofold because they consider themselves inadequate, they anticipate failure, and then because they feel inferior, the prospect of failure is even worse. Does that make sense? Does everybody follow that? So anything, like it could be wanting to change your health or eat differently, right? Well, if I don't think that I have what it takes, or I don't have enough willpower, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not, you know, a good enough cook, or I've never succeeded, so I'm, you know, broken, or it's my genetics, or whatever it is that we believe deep down, that's one thing that makes it very hard to take action and makes us indolent, that fear. And the second part of that that's twofold is if I already feel like a failure, failing again is so much worse than if I feel like a success and I can brush off failure, learn from it, and keep moving forward. Which is why I shared on my Instagram today in a very important video. I really loved it. She said, you know, we always talk about we need accountability and we need self-awareness, but self-awareness and accountability without self-compassion creates shame, creates this fear of inadequacy. Because if we're always becoming more aware of our flaws and we're always holding ourselves accountable, and our accountability is always going to show that we're imperfect, that if we don't have self-compassion in there, we're going to end up in a shame spiral. Like, I'm never going to measure up. And so then it gets worse and worse. And that's what we want to avoid. And it's very important when it comes to health or money or relationships, all these areas that we know are so important to our overall well-being. Okay. Although no one goes through life with 100% success, failures are always unpleasant. and we do our best to succeed, many factors are beyond our control. Even the most carefully planned venture may fail. A person should anticipate success and be able to take failure in stride. And that's where bitachon comes in, and we unhook from the outcome because we know the outcome has actually nothing to do with us. We're responsible for our intentions and our behaviors to the point that we can't. A person who feels inadequate can't do either of those things. Because of the lack of self-confidence, he anticipates he will fail, so he can't set an intention to succeed or prepare for success. And then because of his feelings of unworthiness, when he does fail, it's even more devastating. To avoid being crushed by this failure, he does nothing. On the premise that if you do not try, you can't really fail. Can we all find an area of our life that we've done this, right? Been afraid to really try because we feel so inadequate in that area. And I think all of us have wounds from our childhood or from our adulthood where it's hard, and we have to borrow self-confidence from another area of life and be like, hey, I succeeded here, I can do this. I improved this thing, I can't. It's the same. It's all the same skills. I can apply those and I can do better here. To avoid being crushed by this anticipated failure, he does nothing, on the premise that if you do not try, you cannot lose. The solution to this is what the psalmist says: trust in God and do good. The concept of bitachon, trust in God, refers not to praying for God to help us only, but also to trust the godliness within ourselves. Every person contains within himself a divine soul, a nucleus of godliness, which should help one realize that he is worthy because God created you worthy and you have a soul. You are worthy. And two, you have far greater potential than you've dreamed of. Neurophysiologists say that we actually utilize only a small fraction of our brain capacity. True self-awareness can greatly diminish the baseless fears that paralyze a person and allow him to access Zri Zut.
This is the first thing we say in the morning. Rabba emunasecha. Hashem believes in us.
And so it's taking that and then applying it to our nervous system, making God real, imagining God forbid, in a physical form, but yes, in like a form of someone who's like, I believe in you. You are worthy. You woke up worthy. Before you go and try to do anything today, you're already worthy. If you were already worthy, it would be okay if the outcome didn't happen. But many of us, especially women of our generation, feel a constant state of unworthiness. And if we're not careful, we pass that on to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. One might quote the Talmud that it is incumbent upon a person to avoid exposing oneself to danger except under divine protection. One should realize that there is an appropriate fear and an irrational fear. Sound judgment should enable a person to avoid actual danger. But if one acts foolishly and exposes himself to danger in the hope that God will save him, that's simply reckless and is actually against the divine will, which dictates a person should exercise care. There are some people who seem to function only by going to extremes, in the contrast to the person who worries himself into inaction. They have no caution whatsoever. They may even observe mitzvot recklessly and irresponsibly. For example, there is a mitzvah of tzedakah, which is the highest priority and an inestimable merit. Yet the Talmud sets a limit of 1/5 of one's earnings for tzedakah. Going beyond that may unfairly deprive one's family of their legitimate needs. The Rambam advocates the mean of virtue for every trait, rejecting all extremes as inappropriate. Thus, the virtue of courage is neither reckless endangerment on one extreme nor cowardice on the other. One should dress neither ostentatiously in luxurious garments nor in tattered clothes. And so it is with all traits. While hesitating to do anything because of irrational fear is at one end of the extreme, rushing in headstrong and neglecting to heed possible dangers at the other. The prudent and virtuous person is alert to real danger, but does not allow himself to be disabled by groundless fears. It is only logical for Zri Zut to follow watchfulness. One can hardly practice Zri Zut if one is not watchful. Lack of watchfulness will cause a person to drift into gratifying all physical temptations, which make it difficult for one to develop a love and yearning for God. Once a person has succeeded in watching his behavior and calculating the value of good deeds as opposed to sins, he will more easily avoid evil and develop Zri Zut to do good. So remember, self-awareness was the very first meter we started working on in this book. Self-awareness, self-awareness. And he's saying here that even when you have a lack, it's good to not fill every desire you have. That's where we know instead of filling ourselves up with these very superficial desires that we have all the time, naturally, that Yitzhahara has them for us, that leaves space for us to dig deeper and do things that are more fulfilling, that are a connection to God.
What
right?
falls into superficial? For every person, that's different.
I think that we all know, like he said, superficial is right, dating and dating and dating and dating and never investing it and feeling like you're fulfilled and that you're not alone, but never investing in a deeper romantic relationship that's intimate and vulnerable and long.
Okay.
Dieting and dieting is very different than investing in a long-term relationship with your body, that you feed it well and nourish it and deal with your ups and downs of hormones and life, etc., on a deeper level.
Okay, thank you.
Even, like he says, these chitzoni mitzvot, giving all of your money away to charity, or 70 or 80% of your money to charity, isn't giving you a chance to create a legacy. Like, give 50%, he says, give 20% away, then take care of everything, then start saving, then start investing, create a fund that then can, fund tzedakah for for hundreds of years, create an endowment. Like, there's so many longer term solutions when we pause and we don't give in to every immediate gratification for immediate pleasure, right?
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure. Great question. The 10 steps of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair are not listed haphazardly. They are arranged in a logical order, each one being a prerequisite for the next. It's not unusual to see people reach for something that is beyond their grasp. Whereas the physical sense and action is futile, spiritual matters in this way can be deceptive. For example, there's a principle that one should not study Kabbalah until one is thoroughly versed in the entire Talmud and Halacha, and only then not till he's reached the end of 40. Adequate knowledge of Torah, written and oral, and sound maturity of mind are essential in order to properly understand Kabbalah. It is therefore quite absurd that people who may lack even rudimentary knowledge of Torah try to understand Kabbalah. If premature study of Kabbalah were only futile, this would be of little consequence. Unfortunately, those who are inadequately prepared for the study of Kabbalah can be improperly influenced by their distortion of Kabbalah and might even be carried away by delusional thinking. One must have patience in developing spirituality. There is no microwave to speed up the process. One must laboriously achieve each step before proceeding to the next. And this is where he says these things get in the way. So let's do a quick review. What gets in the way? The first one is just filling up with pleasure and not expecting and understanding that hard work is a part of success. Hard, sustained work, not even just short-term hard work, like long-term effort. And then actual feeling of the pleasure. So there's three things. One, there's expectation that life should be easy. Number two, rejection or resentment of long sustained effort. And then number three, taking the superficial ways that we can fill up our needs and not allowing our needs to go unmet so that we can dive in and get to the better, more fulfilling way to meet that need. And being more expansive of ourselves and what's possible. Okay. Questions, thoughts on Zri Zut? Because our next midah is nikiyut, which is cleanness. And sometimes you hear people talk about this, like, I went in with very clean intentions, right? You've heard people use that term. Like, I went in and I was very clean about how I, bought that or thought about that or had that conversation. So we're going to talk about what that means next in chapter 10. Any questions, thoughts, epiphanies on Zri Zut? Good, keep going.
I was just thinking about ants and how we learn from ants, Zri Zut. And I'm trying to fit this in because they're supposed to be examples to us and they are so focused.
on long sustained effort.
Right. It can take them forever to carry that one thing, but they always are going towards their goal. And if they get sidetracked, the whole anthill disperses. It doesn't stay. It just explained it in my mind clearer. You always hear, oh, ants are Zri Zut because they're always busy. But then if you put all this stuff into it, it really
Right.
is the guidelines. It's what you're saying.
Desires. It's busy doing something, you know, deeper and as a team and as a relationship. Very nice. Right. Okay, so we're going to start this next character trait that we want to develop, this cleanliness of mind and spirit. We find ourselves again as to like, remember, first, we're just going to clarify, what is this to be clean? It means clean, but it connotes a physical state of being, of something washed with soap free of dirt. The immaculateness is a bit clumsy. It fails to convey the concept of nikias. Purity is more appropriate, but it's really for a different trait we'll discuss later. We have no choice but to use this Hebrew word. And that's what he keeps saying. There's no English word for Zri Zut. We say motivated aligned action. Okay. There's no word for, what was the word? The first word? Watchfulness. Only the hair, right? Zihirut. We said it was like self-awareness. So we're gonna have to find, like, I really do hear people use this language of clean. Like I was very clean in how I went about this. So we're gonna use that word for now. The trait of nikias refers to a person being completely clean in his attitude that could lead to sin. Not only does this person avoid behavior that is directly, patently sinful, but it also beyond rationalizing his behavior. We know that rationalization occurs when a person has a desire for something forbidden and leads himself to believe that it's actually permissible. Nikias means that you have rid yourself of the desires for the forbidden act so that you cannot be an inadvertent transgression resulting from rationalization. That's what clean means. Means I know, like, this is clear. I'm not rationalizing anything. It's an honesty and integrity, I think, is a good, you know, like we say clean, but what we mean is honest, authentic, you know, integrity. This step is a quantum leap. The first two steps, watchfulness, aka self-awareness, Zri Zut, motivated aligned action, deal essentially with behavior, whereas nikias is a state of mind or emotion. Right? To be authentic, to be intentional, to be what's the word? Intellectually honest. Okay? Such that you don't just avoid doing the mistake, but you don't have a temptation for it anymore. A person who is self-aware and watchful to avoid committing a sin still might find technicalities and loopholes that would allow him the gratification he seeks. Right? I worked out today. I can eat the donut. It's Shabbos. I have a second soul. I can eat whatever I want. It's like we're always rationalizing instead of being intellectually honest. I'm going to eat the thing. I'm not going to eat the thing, right? When we're in rationalization, even when we're succeeding in being self-aware, we can easily fall into rationalization. The Ramchal points out that although he is cautious to avoid what he recognizes as sinful, he may be inadvertently duped into thinking that a particular act is permissible. This, I think, is really one of the hardest traits. We are constantly in a loop, right, of rationalization. It's very hard, and that's why we're supposed to have a friend and a rabbi and a mentor to talk things out with and get outside perspective. Am I rationalizing this? And not to just be surrounded by yes people. Like, of course you should be mad at him and speak that way. He deserved it, right? Like, no, we don't want those kind of friends around us. We want someone who's going to be like, yeah, he was wrong, but like you probably, right? Like you probably shouldn't have said that. You probably shouldn't, like, you probably also need to apologize for how you're, or learn and work on your tone, right? Like we want a friend who's going to help us be intellectually honest. The human mind is most ingenious in convincing itself that what it wishes to believe. Absolute avoidance of sin can result only when the desire thereto has been eradicated. But come on, is this realistic? I'm glad he asked the question we're all thinking, right? After all, a human being is a biological entity composed of protoplasm, which has physical cravings. Granted, you can train yourself to master your behavior and exert control of your actions, but can you actually eradicate desire? The answer to this is yes. As a practical example, I've heard many recovered alcoholics state that during their early years of recovery, they had to restrain themselves more or less often from yielding to the craving for alcohol. But at some point, the craving miraculously disappeared. Some attributed this to divine intervention, with the God removing their craving for this harmful substance. Elimination of desire can come even without direct divine intervention. Ibn Ezra comments on the last of the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not covet your neighbor's wife or anything that belongs to him, and asks, how can you be instructed not to covet? To desire something which is subject to legislation? We previously noted the Ibn answer answers that a person would not have desire for something which he could never possibly attain. Thus, if a person who is greedy for wealth was to learn that one star that is of light years distant, there is a mountain of gold and diamonds, he would not give a second thought. And as much as he has no possible access to this wealth, he does not even desire it. The Ebenezer contends that if a person was absolutely committed to the earlier commandments, not to steal, not to kill, not to commit adultery, in a manner that whatever belonged to his neighbor was absolutely inaccessible to him, similar to the diamonds in the distant star, he would have no desire whatever for them. Thou shalt not covet is thus both a natural consequence and a reinforcement of the previous commandments. Let's break that down. What do you understand from that?
I'm going to put it on a totally different level without any of these examples, but it happened to me personally that when you take yourself off of all sugar and you don't eat sugar for a month or two, and then you go eat something sweet, even a small piece of chocolate, your brain already learned to desensitize. It doesn't even taste good anymore.
And yet we rationalize that's not healthy. We should definitely be having some sugar, right? Like no extremes. And we can, right? And then we can be
stuck. You allow it on Shabbos and you allow it on Yom Tov. Okay.
Right, exactly. But there's no extremes. But then there's the difference between no extremes and rationalization. And it's very personal. We talked about like very personal.
Right.
And dangerous to one person might not be dangerous to another person, or you might just not know it's not good for you today, and your side effects might not show up for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. We're like, no, she doesn't have a weight problem. She can eat as much crap as she wants. No, your weight problem or not is irrelevant to what it means to be nourished.
Right.
It doesn't matter if the child doesn't have any specific vitamin deficiencies. That kind of behavior is not good for her arbitrarily, right? Mm-hmm. How much of anything that differs person to person, but we know that a lot of sugar is not good for anybody, whether or not you're showing symptoms today, right? That doesn't mean you have to be full of sugar. What do you consider sugar? Dairy has sugar, fruit has sugar, all whole grains break down into sugar, vegetables all have sugar, break down into some form of sugar in your body as well.
Right. But so is that a rationalization when you say, but those are healthy sugars?
Right? What's true, what's not? Where am I being intellectually honest? And where am I saying, well, then I guess I should just eat fat? But no, your body's supposed to run on carbs, which are sugars. Which ones are healthy? How much? It's variable. There's not such a specific, thank God, amount. But we have all these indicators, and we do know overall what's healthy. And as long as we're within those parameters, unless we have a problem, there's nothing to deal with, right? We don't have to be so prescriptive. Well, people always ask me, well, what's the healthiest vegetable? There is no healthiest vegetable. You're supposed to have the greatest variety of vegetables. That's the healthiest vegetable, right? Like, what's the best carb for weight loss? The best carb. First of all, that's personal. For some people, it could be sweet potatoes and corn. For some people, it could be chickpeas and fruits. For everybody, it's going to be slightly different. All of them are healthy. If you see you have a problem with one, or one doesn't react well to you or are inflamed to, that's how you know that shouldn't be at the top of your list. right? And so with all these things, also with exercise, which is the best exercise? Well, we want to have a variety. We want to have something for our strength. We want to have something for our mobility. We want to have something for our flexibility. We want to have time to rest and recover in between. What way you go about doing those things is personal preference and personality and time and stage of life. There's not one perfect thing, but we always want the perfect thing because we don't want to do any of this work on our character traits, right? We want someone to do this. And then God forbid they tell you to do that. You want to rebel against it. You're wrong. And don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
Right? That's what we really want. Okay. There appears to be a difference of opinion between the Ramchal and the Ramban here. Okay. There's a difference between the watchful person and the clean person. It is although the former tries to subdue his cravings, this does not yet bring about a change in his very nature, whereas once he has achieved total avoidance of sin and develops an intense love for God, he separates himself from his desires and directs himself towards spiritual perfection, that he's no longer subject to the seduction of his physical desires.
So here it gets worse, though, the higher you get.
So this is like he's going to go into this because there really is a very divergent approach here in a lot of Jewish texts and among Jewish leadership. And it makes perfect sense to me why there would be such a divergence here, because not everybody's the same and not everybody has the same potential. And in the Tanya, it says everybody can avoid doing sin, but not everybody can get to the level of never having a desire for sin.
Right, but I thought that once you improve your level of not having the Yetzer Hara, the desire, then you're tested on an even stronger level.
So again, we're going to see what's going on. There appears to be a difference of opinion between the Ramchal and the Rambam. The Rambam says a person should develop a revulsion to things that are not allowed or immoral or unethical, but those that are not immoral in character yet are forbidden, laws that are beyond human understanding, such as mixing meat and milk, mixture of wool and linen, consumption of non-kosher animals. A person shouldn't say, I despise them, but rather should say, I desire them, but the Torah has forbidden them.
Right.
The Ramchal is saying that one's love and devotion of God should become so intense that he's not interested and to anything that is against the divine will. Okay? And so here we have, right? Should I overcome my desire, or should I, like let's say on a basic level, our husband hates Brussels sprouts. Is it better to be like, yeah, to create like a thing, or I don't really like them that much either, so it's no big deal and we don't have them because my husband hates them? Or is it a higher level of love to be like, I actually love Brussels sprouts and I don't eat them or serve them in the house because it matters to you? And I think this acknowledgement of this diversity is that there's a huge diversity in human personality, and some people are going to lean towards one or the other, I think, on a very organic, authentic level, right?
On both okay.
Right, exactly, which is why we have such a huge diversity of rabbis and opinions, is because right? If there's never been another Esther Bracha ever, there's never been another you ever in creation, and there's never been another me, then again, like we're from maybe a family of things that are similar to other people who had similar similarities to us, but we're completely unique. There needs to be a huge diversity in how to succeed. It can't be a one size fits all.
Right.
Okay. So the Ramchal, okay, we said that. The Ramchal's position is supported by the Rav Shneur Zalman in Tanya, who describes the average person is one who's observant of all aspects of Torah, but still must subdue his temptations. However, one who proceeds to the level of tzaddik has eliminated even temptation and is undergoing a change of his very nature. And he says that not everybody is given that potential in the time. He says not everybody has the potential to be a tzaddik, but we can all be a tzaddik on the level of not sinning and having more good deeds. That level, that definition, everybody can attain. the level of never having temptation. And he brings so many rabbis that say, I'm not a tzaddik, I'm a Beinoni. A Beinoni is somebody who has just overcome his temptations to sin. He still experiences temptation. And he says it's not a common level, spiritual level that is given to people to get to a level of not having any temptation at all. As we saw, all of our forefathers experienced temptation. So if Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, David, Shlomo, Amelech, King, they all experienced temptation. Okay, like we're in good company.
Right.
Okay, we don't have to feel like we're slighted that we didn't get maybe the potential to never have temptation at all. There's no question that this level, being clean, is difficult to attain. Whereas avoidance of obvious sin is relatively easy. Relatively easy, I don't know how relatively easy it is. I guess in comparison to this, the other ones are relatively easy, right? That's what relative means. Only when you're comparing it to something much harder, well, you'd say, well, that's easy, right? Once you're lifting 50-pound weights, you're like, that 2 pound is relatively easy. When you've never lifted weights before, 2 pounds is very difficult. So we have to remember that word relative, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Since evil in them is evident, lesser offenses, which can be easily rationalized, are more difficult to avoid. I find this to be true with food. I will absolutely be more likely to overeat healthy treats than junk food. I'm more likely to overeat chicken or salmon or whatever. And what does overeat mean? Over what I need. Than I would to go overeat on cake, right? Because it's easier to justify. It's easier to rationalize, right?
It's dangerous to overeat healthy food.
It is unhealthy to overeat all food. What happens when you overeat all food? What is overeating is different person to person. But we know when we've done it, pretty much.
Right. True. Okay.
It creates a storage of fat and things on the body which weigh us down and keep us from being able to function. It sucks energy from our digestion.
And even fruit and salad, I'm asking, like things like that too?
All food and salad, fruit should be eaten in volume, but there's a difference between eating in volume and overeating. Overeating means you're filling food where it doesn't belong. You're overeating.
You're overfilling.
Not a healthy behavior. Of all the unhealthy behaviors, right? He says these are the hardest to avoid. These are the easiest to rationalize. We're in good company, right? When people take Lashon Hara and they're like, no, but he's like a real sinner. Like, it's okay, right? Like, you don't know what she did. I can speak Lashon Hara about the politicians. Like, they're evil. Whoever it is that you've decided is okay to speak badly about, everybody and myself, like, those are the easiest things to be like, right? That's not where the Talmud states that most people succumb to theft. A minority, illicit relations, but everyone, he said it, succumbs to Lashon Hara. Because the latter may appear so innocent that one is not cautious enough to guard against it. Once a person, though, has achieved Nikias, he does not rationalize even lesser offenses. He has triumphed in a major internal struggle and has achieved a high level of spirituality. He doesn't say that he never fails, or he never speaks Lashon Hara, or he's perfect in his Nikias. Clean means, I know I made a mistake. I'm not rationalizing it. I've gotten to the level where I see I overate on that healthy food. I remember I was coaching in one of my weight loss groups, and I've been in maintenance now for 9 years since I lost 80 pounds, and it was like year 3.
You lost 80 pounds?
And it was year 3, okay? And I remember sharing that I was really working on myself to not eat from the cutting board when I cut fruits and vegetables for my kids. Like, you cut up food for your kids and you eat what's left on the cutting board, the end of the apple, the core. And I was working on myself to just break the habit I'm not asking myself, do I want this? Do I want to eat this? And cutting myself vegetables when I cut them vegetables, cutting myself a piece of fruit, putting it on a plate and eating it. But just eating food that's left over. That's just there. That's just, rather than throwing it away, just tossing it in my mouth. I was really working on this, and people were so upset that I shared it. Just off the cuff, someone said, "What are you working on?" I said, "I'm really working on not eating off the cutting board." And like that, I work on, if I notice I do it, I tried to spit it out. I went through that. But now I really very rarely will eat from the cutting board, like almost ever, unless I'm cutting food for myself, in which case, like, but like very rare. I broke the internal habit. I eat a lot. It's not that I don't eat a lot, but like just that. I used to be a big problem. I would clean Shabbos, clean the platters from the Shabbat table, wouldn't touch the potato kugel on the table, but I'd eat all the scraps when I'm clearing the platter, right? I didn't want to eat it. I could have, if I wanted to eat it, I would have put it on a plate and eaten it and said, I only like the crispy ends. Great, eat that. But Nikias is saying, there's something not clean here. Why am I doing this in this way? This isn't how I want to behave. But again, this isn't your first step. First, we have to be self-aware. We have to have motivated action. We have to be getting all this other progress. And now we look at these areas of rationalization and we're like, I need to clean this up, right? And he said, you can't skip ahead. You have to go in order. So we all have areas where we might just be in the initial stage of our life, and we have areas where we're in the Zri Zut stage, and then we all have areas where maybe we're really pretty good. And now we need to apply cleaning up our rationalizations in one of our strengths, right? Okay. In what way are the majority of people guilty of theft? If you return home from a score and discover the clerk gave you 5 extra cents exchange and you did not return it, you are guilty of theft. If you sell an item and discover you overcharged the customer, you are guilty of theft. If you don't know which of the many customers it was and you have no way of making restitution. In this way, most people sooner or later are in the wrongful possession of another person's property, which constitutes theft, right? Have you woken somebody up, right? Theft of sleep, right? Like, according to the Talmud, no one escapes the touch of Lashon Hara. For example, the Talmud states one should not praise a person because praise is likely to result in someone else making a negative comment. How so? Just pay attention. When someone says Mr. X is such a wonderful, kind, generous person, quite frequently one of the listeners will say, yes, but, and go on to mention something uncomplimentary. And this way, the person who praised him was indirectly responsible for the negative comment. An excellent method to avoid Lashon Hara is simply not to speak about another person at all. As one ethicist said, if you wish to praise, praise God. If you wish to find fault, look to yourself. Try to avoid talking about other people. The Ramchal states that even a watchful person may transgress what he considers trivial. He quotes the Talmud, sins that a person tramples on because he considers them insignificant are brought before him at the time of judgment. Nikias, this internal authenticity of emotional, intellectual integrity, as absolute cleanliness, should not be thought of as surgical sterility. And the latter, eradication of the bacteria is not sufficient because one remaining germ can multiply and cause serious infection. Nikias requires total cleanliness, even of the minutiae that are improper, and this can be attained only when we have eliminated all tendency toward wrongdoing. And remember, we've now clarified what this is. And we're going to pull back on our gate of trust here for a second and let you know and me know God is crazy about us just how we are. He's going to take care of all of our needs, independent of how many mitzvot or averot we've done. Bitachon is not relevant. It's a totally different level than din and cheshbon, judgment and reward. It is totally separate. And therefore, it's safe for us to go on this journey of working on ourselves because we're in God's loving arms. I'm giving you this whole lifetime to work on yourself. I'm not expecting you to be perfect today. I'm not expecting you to be perfect tomorrow. I'm expecting you to be cultivating, right, the consistent effort of this Zri Zut to motivate us and increase our self-awareness so that now we're ready for Nikiyut. So next week, we're going to talk about what are the details. Now we clarified kind of the definition. Next week for the details. And we're going to have time maybe just for the details. The details of Nikiyut seems, is pretty long. We're just
Thanks for giving us your mommy.
Yep. He and I learn bitachon every night before we go to bed from the Daily Bitachon book. It's fabulous. I highly recommend it. It's also great for kids because it's a lot of stories. So this next chapter is going to be long. And that's okay, because I think that's a good estimation of like what a challenge this one's going to be. But remember, the challenge isn't getting it perfect. The challenge is even being aware when I'm rationalizing. So that's what we want to take into this week, is to start to think like, okay, like, am I just being more aware that we are rationalizing when we're rationalizing? I'm making light of this because I'm saying like, I'm not there yet. I don't need to deal with this yet. Like, no, I always need to be cultivating my self-awareness in this relationship of God. And I can do that because I have bitachon, because I have trust in God. And I know he's crazy about me. He loves me. He's only ever going to do good, no matter what mistakes I make. Only good is coming down from heaven, even when it comes in a package that isn't enjoyable. There's only good, etc., etc. I can't wait to learn Gate of Trust again with you guys next. Thank you so much, Esther. And I'm glad everybody I see has been really enjoying the YouTube recordings. Keep watching them, share them, and subscribe. Mwah. Love you guys. Have a good night.
You too. Everyone should have a Tzom call on Tuesday.
Yes. Bye.
Thanks, Lily.